Okay, after Dr. Long's amazing introduction, now I get to talk. So this was my dissertation project. So it's called Choices 360, which is what we implemented through Park Ridge, the nonprofit here. It's to address STDs in adolescents through an abstinence-based seminar. So just a little introduction for background. So why would I do this project? So nationally, there was an increase of STDs. It was up 7% from 2017 to 2021. And we're seeing that more than half in 15 to 24-year-olds, which is why when looking at the population here in Lubbock, we chose to do middle schoolers instead of high schoolers. And so in 2021, an estimated 27 million new cases of STDs resulted in a burden of $16 billion. The results from the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey said that Texas youth are significantly more likely to have had sex for the first time before the age of 13. And Lubbock was ranked 7th for the highest STD cases in 2018 in Texas. And the reason that it says 2018 is because they really only do the survey every couple of years. So we should have, probably this year, they'll come out with a more up-to-date data. So a little bit more background, the Healthy People 2030 decided to make a national objective saying that they wanted to raise the percentage of adolescents that were receiving formal sexual education, and an abstinence-based teaching aid would be needed to cultivate positive character traits, to define long-term objectives, and to foster emotionally healthy relationships. And so since I went to a Christian university, we had a lot of embedded scripture, and we did a lot of papers on how to implement servant leadership into scripture. So you'll see a lot of scripture on here, but this was just one of the verses that we chose for my project. So the purpose of my project was to provide an abstinence-based seminar to middle school youth to, 1, increase their knowledge surrounding the physical and emotional risks of sex, 2, increase their confidence to resist unwanted sexual advances, and 3, to increase their behavioral intention to remain abstinent until they are a long-term committed relationship, such as marriage. So my PICO question was, in middle school adolescents, how does an abstinence-based seminar compared to no seminar affect knowledge, self-efficacy, and behavioral intent within 1 month's time? And I only did 1 month's time because it was for, of course, a class. And so this class actually was able to take place over spring break. So it's interesting when I do go over the results to keep in mind that the students, they received this information and then they were on spring break, and then we did the post-survey. So they were kind of given more freedom, I like to say, within those 30 days if they were going to make choices or do certain behaviors, kind of more the freedom to do that, because usually parents aren't home or they're going on vacation with friends and all those sorts of things. So we did theoretical framework and review of literature for this project. I used the Johns Hopkins evidence-based practice model just to kind of get an overview of how I wanted to do the project. So of course you kind of look at what the issue is. So I did a community health survey on Lubbock. We looked at the evidence literature, which you'll see in a little bit, telling me what's the best way to approach sexual education, especially if it's in a setting like Lubbock. So just a brief summary of some of the strengths of that model. It let me craft a clinical question, PICO question. Healthcare professionals were using critically appraised evidence, and it allowed me to adapt to a diverse patient population, which was the students. And limitations, I just put resistance to change and time constraints because we did have that 30-day window, and then criteria not being met due to demanding schedules. So this is just kind of how I applied the framework. So I had my Nursing 740 class, which was my community health needs assessment class, which revealed the rise in the STDs, my PICO question, and then the implementation of an abstinence-based seminar into the middle school. I also used Myra Levine's conservation model, and so she really looks at integrity and how to put that in. And a huge part of the Choices 360 curriculum is teaching the students about integrity. We even ask them, can you define it for us? What does it mean? What does it look like to be a person of integrity? And we really reminded them that integrity is not something that you lose if you make choices. It's something that you kind of strive at to be every day. So just because we really tell the students, even if you've made choices that you're like, hey, I already went outside of my boundaries, so why not keep going? It's something that you can regain, and it's something that even as adults we strive at every day. So just some strengths about that framework. It allowed me to assess, plan, and implement. It was from a holism approach, and of course it was grounded in integrity, and then some limitations where it was just an older model. And this is how I applied it. We used one more model. It was a faith-based model. It was the model for impact. So IMP, ACT, they all stand for different things. This was a very easy one to implement because, like I said, I used Park Ridge to help me with my project, and they are a faith-based nonprofit. And everything we did was always rooted in scripture or prayer and just being able to come together and give each other support, especially for a topic that was kind of looked at like, oh no, she's gonna go there, she's at a Christian university. So it was very helpful to have prayer and to have servant leadership within this project. So the strengths of that was Christ-centered servant leadership and improving outcomes and being able to pray and meditate in the Word. And the limitations were just dismiss of other steps and preconceived notions since it was a faith-based framework. So I applied it, obviously, again, in the urban West Texas STD rates. We used lots of prayer and scripture. And then, like I said, partnering with a nonprofit like Park Ridge allowed me to use it from a biblical lens. And here's just some more of the acronym. I did a literature review. I used scripture, like I said, and then the seminar really does reflect the love of Jesus, and it really hopes to bring a positive change to the students' lives. And we really wanted them to know, like, we're not here to judge you. Like I said, even if they've made like what they feel like is mistakes, we're not there to go and lecture them. And so it was really refreshing to be able to get feedback from them when we were speaking to them in real time. We also have a little anonymous question box that they were able to pop questions into. And so we were really coming from a place of love and just making sure that the students left knowing that their life mattered. Here's some more scripture that I used. My literature shirts, I use keywords STD prevention, abstinence, biblical worldview, sex education, and middle and high school students. The inclusion criteria was only full-text articles published in English that were used between 2000 and 2023. And my exclusion criteria was duplicate studies and irrelevant outcomes or population groups. So this is just kind of a little snippet of what my diagram looked like. The level of articles that I received and the quality, I had 15 articles in total. And then here it is in just kind of like more of a chart so it's easier to see. So 5 of the 15 articles suggested implementing STD education into a curriculum that was age appropriate. Another 5 said that the public and the parents needed to be in support of the abstinence-based seminar. So it's important to note too that we did do a parent meeting. So the week before we implemented into the school, all parents were invited to come. We passed out all of the material that we would be covering with the students so that they could actually see exactly what we would be saying. They were able to ask questions or voice concerns if they had any. And at first it was a little intimidating, but as we started talking, I think that the parents felt more comfortable, and most of them by the end were actually very gracious because they said, look, we don't want to have this conversation with our students, so thank you. So it turned out to be a really positive thing. 4 of the other articles said that a healthcare provider should be the ones teaching abstinence-based seminars, and 2 out of those 4 stated that students showed an increase in knowledge, beliefs, and intentions among sexually experienced students. One of the other articles said that school-based interventions are effective to prevent STDs, and they saw a change in sexual risk behaviors that improved attitudes, knowledge, and practice. So best practice was implementing an STD education that involved age appropriateness, abstinence-based, and was led by a healthcare professional. And of course, getting support from not only the parents and the general public, but also the school district. I think that that was probably more tricky than getting parents on board, just because of like the verbiage, the language. They didn't want us to use the word marriage. There were just a lot of little things that we went back and forth with, but in the end, it worked out really well. So the design and methodology, I addressed constraints associated with parental consent. A quasi-experimental design was utilized and incorporated into the pre and post. I had 3 Likert scale format questions that went over knowledge, self-efficacy, and behavior, and those are right, so they're on the next slide, sorry. We went to a public middle school in Urban County, West Texas from March 4th to the 7th. And they were all 6th grade students that were willing to participate and whose parents and student consented. We had 69 participants in the pre-survey and 60 in the post, which was really good. It was much higher than I expected. So these were the survey questions. For knowledge, we asked, I know I am knowledgeable about the physical and emotional risks associated with having sex, and we had them circle from 1 to 5. For self-efficacy was I feel confident that I am able to stick to my own relationship boundaries and resist unwanted sexual advances. And then the behavioral intent, I am likely to wait until a long-term committed relationship before having sex. So the curriculum, what did we talk about? So the first day was about protecting your body. So we went over topics like risks of sexual activity, pregnancy, and STDs. And the second day was protecting your mind. So effects of sexual activity on the brain, avoiding early sexual activity, boundaries, and an action plan. So from there, we kind of went with, you know, who is your friend group? Who are these people? We asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? So they would all tell us. So we're like, how do you think you can get to where you want to be? And so we have them do a little worksheet of like people that are on their team. Do we think these people can help you get there? So of course we ask, like, it could be a coach, it could be somebody at your church, it could be a friend's parent, it could be any of these people. So they're already kind of thinking long term, hey, who am I hanging out with? Who is going to get me where I want to be? And then of course boundaries, where we talked about integrity a lot. Like if you've already think you've crossed your boundary, it's okay, you can still come back from that. And I think that over anything that we talked about, that pretty much resonated with them the most. Because I don't know if they've been told or what they're looking at on social media, but knowing that somebody genuinely actually cared about them and wasn't just being there to tell them, like, you made a mistake, you're never going to amount to anything, all of those things that may be said really resonated with them. And we even had some students that would stay after to talk with us, or a student or students that we even took to see like a counselor because maybe other issues had been going on. So it was really rewarding. Data analysis, we used menti.com to collect the data. The students were able, because they all had iPads at the school, which is crazy, but that's how they do it. So they were able to literally put in the code. They're all anonymous. They get to pick little like emoji figures. That's pretty much the only identifier that was on there. And they would fill out all the questions for us. So it was downloaded into Excel file and uploaded, which of course was password protected. I completed an independent t-test to utilize and evaluate the mean scores from the pre and post, as well as a Mann-Whitney U to compare the rank order. And the reason that I used those is because, like I said, they were completely anonymous, so there would have been no way for me to know from the first day to day 30 because there was no way to identify the student. And so we wanted to make sure that the students were remaining anonymous just to protect them. So that kind of goes into this, the protection of human subjects. The data was stored on the Mentimeter website, and again was protected by a username and password. And the only risk that we could find was just the potential risk of embarrassment, not for us, but for the students. And like I said, we kind of did find, just by way of trial and error, we did end up having groups that were all boys or all girls, and those groups that were all male ended up asking more questions even during the presentation. They didn't even wait to do it anonymously, and the same with the girls. So we think that, yes, of course, it's a risk for embarrassment anytime we're going to talk about stuff like this, but we did find that when we were able to kind of segregate the different sexes, they did better. So findings. So we had 37 males and 32 females. 57 identified as white, 2 Asian, 2 American Indian or Alaskan Native, 7 Black or African American, and 1 Asian. 14 identified as being Hispanic or Latino, so the most frequently observed demographic was 6th grade white males. So knowledge, this is just a little snippet of the findings. So the mean of the knowledge score levels was, did increase, but did not increase enough to be statistically significant, which I thought out of all 3 would definitely be statistically significant. However, the confidence was, as you can see here, found to be statistically significant. So we went from a pre-mean rank from 37 to a post of 96. So it was a big jump. Also in behavior, you can see here, there was this statistical significant difference from the pre and the post from 42 to 8 to 90. And so like I said in the beginning, it's kind of important to note that these kids had that 30 days of spring break where they were able to kind of be more free with their schedule and perhaps put themselves in other situations where they may not have made the best decisions. So in discussion, according to the pre and post surveys, the Choices 360 seminar did enhance knowledge, confidence, and behavior when it comes to remaining abstinent until they're in a long-term committed relationship. Although an increase in knowledge was observed among the students, it did not show a significant difference. And the two-tailed Mann-Whitney test was used due to keeping the students and their data completely anonymous. So I was able to apply the theoretical framework, kind of like I said before, based on the Johns Hopkins evidence-based practice model, the Meyer-Levine conservation model, and then Dr. Gorey's model for impact. So strengths and limitations of doing this project. A strength was definitely being able to use Park Ridge along with the school district as a platform for the impressionable students and to just, if nothing else, make them know that their lives matter and just the value of their lives. Also understanding of physical and emotional risks associated with sex, and the significant increase in confidence really struck a chord with me when I was looking at the knowledge, because I was a little bit bummed out when I saw that the knowledge wasn't statistically significant. But then when I looked at the behavior and the self-confidence, to me that resonated more, because to me that stands more long-term. So the stuff that we were allowed to teach at a middle school level was very minuscule compared to what would be taught at the high school level, just because of their age and what the school district and the parents were comfortable with us saying. So in my head, being able to kind of plant that seed and let it grow until they get to high school would help with that. Some limitations were implementation was completed only at 6th grade, so it would have been nice to do 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then some classes had low attendance. So we had one class that was like 50 boys, and then the next class was like 5 people. So it was just a little bit, we just had to roll with it because we used the health education class time. So if the parents did sign in and consent, that was just the group that we were given. So for the future, being able to do subsequent research could involve middle school students, like I said, across 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then being able to integrate this again with a healthcare provider. We were even thinking of if the school really wanted to do it and they didn't have anybody, everyone pretty much has a school nurse. And so if that school nurse was able to or confident in taking on this project, some of the school nurses already have relationships with the students, and then as well the students would be able to go to that school nurse if they had further questions or concerns or follow-up. A longitudinal study would be good to be able to track the middle school youth into high school, so we could gauge whether they've sustained abstinence. And then, like we said, gender-specific assemblies, so being able to kind of segregate the boys and the girls so they're not together. So we might get more questions and be able to answer more. And then just continuing to use the anonymous question box through Mentimeter, because that was really helpful for us to be able to gauge, okay, are we covering the right topics, or was there something else we could have dived into more? Of course, there was groups that didn't ask any questions, so we just kind of went back and took questions that were asked previously to answer those, because we know that if one student had the question, they probably all did. So in conclusion, there is a necessity for abstinence-based seminar to target our youth adult population. Students require education about physical and emotional consequences of engaging in risky sexual activity. So if we're able to establish and remain boundaries for their well-being and happiness as youth adults, abstinence-based teaching is linked with emotional, social, and physical health and contributes to spiritual well-being. So one thing that I really liked about Choices 360 and my project is we're going into the school, and yeah, we're only there for 2 days, and then we're going back to the post-survey, but leaving them with the information of Park Ridge, to me in my mind, was able to close that circle of communication. So if they had further questions or they needed services because maybe they had already crossed some boundaries, they're able to get that. It's not like, hey, we're going in and we're giving you all this education, see you later, bye. They're really left with somebody, and like Park Ridge has social media, so they know when we tell the students, like, everything that you do there is confidential. You can call, your parents aren't gonna be able to, like, you know, have you seen my daughter or my son? And so being able to give the students like one more outlet of, hey, we're here, we care about you, your life matters. And then there's also an organization in Lubbock that is here and cares about you, was really great. So these are my references. Any questions?